Okay, so we're going to kick it off. And here's my first question, which is for all of you, actually. And I've been thinking about this for a while now. And honestly, I haven't been in the dating scene forever. I'm kind of ancient. Um, but what's interesting to me is that we have a lot about how technology has changed romance, sex, dating, hooking up, everything, relationships. In good ways, in some ways, the reason they want to take smartphones away from young women in villages is because they feel like it gives them sexual freedom, to build conversations with other people. It's given a lot of freedom. The internet has given a lot of freedom and the ability to connect with each other for the queer community. So it has been a great sort of emancipatory, sort of great tool. But on the other hand, there's also a lot of, you know, complaining about the ways in which technology has sort of damaged relationships, made them, made connections more difficult, or led to all sorts of things that you call, ghosting, breadcrumbing, all sorts of, and you have routinely, at least, 5 times a year, someone will write an article about how they've given up dating apps, right? So, and how it's horrible and it sucks. So I wanted to really talk about, and then at the same time, I realized a lot of the complaints about human beings have about their relationships with each other of whatever kind, um, sort of haven't really changed. We might call it different things like breadcrumbing or ghosting or whatever. At some level, we're still behaving as well or as poorly with each other. So I would love to start with a general question as to how you see the effect of technology on our relationships, like whether it's sex, love, dating, hooking up, anything, any kind of relationship. So I don't know who wants to go first. So, Leeza, Meenakshi.
I haven't dated since
Yeah.
there were apps, really. So, and last time I was single was 10 years ago. So the grand old age of apps just went right by me, which is a shame because, Uber and Tinder came out the year after I had become with someone. Become with someone? No, that's wrong. But you know what I mean. Committed. But back in the day, I used to do a story for NDTV about when Tinder first came out, for their blog, not for their television. And I asked people, I asked women I knew and men I knew what they wanted from the app. And a lot of the women, surprisingly enough, told me it was hard to find anyone looking for a serious relationship on Tinder. And I was wondering at that time whether India was ready for casual dating yet, or whether our age group was ready for casual dating. So I mean, I don't want to generalize over here, but I feel like what the nice thing about technology and dating apps now is that it's made people a lot freer, a lot easier to be able to date without putting expectations on it. But I could be wrong. Tell me, people who have used apps. You guys tell me.
I was one of the people who routinely deleted after downloading it for 24 hours. But as as you've said, is I think it's the breadcrumbing, ghosting, all these things are always going to be there. The only thing that apps have given us is this sort of illusion, if you want to call it, of more choice. So I think people are finding ways to be shitty around apps. Like there are plenty of people who've gone on dates and or as they've after they've slept with somebody, they found that somebody's swiping already, or on dates they're swiping to see if they've got a better option, better match. So I overall I think it's going to be a huge, like I'm firmly on the side of this is a good thing, this is a force for good overall. We do need to break out of our little like circles, and the dating apps, for instance, is one good way to meet people who you might not normally meet in your same like circles, in your same like little class and caste circles, for instance. So this is one good way to break that. I think that there needs to be there's going to be a bit of an adjustment period for sure, because we're not to bring like dating apps into places where consent is still not really like widely understood for so many people. So it's going to be a rough ride, I think, but overall I think it's a good thing. Leeza, what about you?
Leeza,
I
you're on
think
mute.
that yes, sorry, I unmuted myself. Since you both spoke about dating apps, I think there are other ways than just dating apps. The technology has impacted our personal lives or sex lives or love lives or whatever you want to call it. And, selecting a mate is just one of the things, and dating apps make that, I suppose, new and this multiplicity of choice and all of that. But I think even if you're in a relationship and in the pandemic, obviously, for many people who don't live with their partner or are in a long distance situation, haven't been able to see them for months or whatever, like that, technology has been kind of the only way of staying connected.
Yeah.
So I think that is a huge benefit. I mean, at least that's the sort of feedback I've been receiving from my audience in terms of like, the only thing keeping the spark alive at this point are the sex and the video calls and it's unfortunate that there are privacy concerns on the apps that we use to enable this communication, particularly when it comes to video and photos sharing and stuff like that. But I do think it allows for you to keep something going that, I mean, when I was in college, there were no dating apps. And if somebody lived, further than like 5 kilometers from my college, it was just not going to happen. I was in New York City, and if they were in Brooklyn, I was like, we're not even going to, I will never see you. I am such a nerd. I'm going to be at my library. We will never meet, And there wasn't, I don't know, we weren't FaceTiming and stuff back then. So I feel like technology does enable a sense of connection, especially at a time like this, that I'm grateful for.
We don't have any questions yet. It would be lovely to get some, but fine. I will plow ahead. And actually, so what caught my attention, Priya, is that you talked about consent, right? And we talk a lot of consent, about consent in sort of one-on-one, where you're physically present, both of you in the same room. How does sort of technology complicate consent in terms of we share things with each other, we sext each other, we send photos and videos to each other. There's pressure to share that women face, right? How more complicated is consent, because we're sort of interacting with each other in all sorts of different ways, not just two people in a room.
I think that there's a real sort of lack of understanding in terms of, let's say, if somebody shares something with you, then people might be like, well, she shared it with me, I can send it to my entire group chat, or of boys, or there's not an understanding that consent must be specific, and it is revocable at any time, and it's for like one person, it's not for the world, etc. So I think that people have a sort of like a mentality that if you're taking photos of yourself, then don't be surprised if they get leaked, right? Because like you consented to that. So there's a very victim blaming attitude to this. But yeah, so I think it's not, it makes it so much more difficult because people don't have like a sophisticated understanding of it. But yeah, anyone else?
I mean, I think
maybe we just sorry, Leeza,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just saying that maybe technology is just making it easier to not consent in a way. There used to be a time when I sent an SMS to a friend, it would stay with my friend. There used to be a time when I sent a letter to someone, it would stay with someone unless they made photocopies of the letter and sent it out. But I think it's making it easier, and therefore we're seeing a lot more conversations around consent and stuff these days, because people feel like they have to specify, no, you cannot do this, or yes, you can do that. The conversations that we weren't having offline are now happening online. So that's why we're seeing a lot more of it.
Leeza?
I was just saying that I think, we have the technology without having had any rules or conversations about how this technology is to be used. So, I mean, people have smartphones now without even having toilets necessarily. So it's confusing to have this overload of access and information and communication without necessarily having had a lead up to get to this point, and some ground rules that have already been established. So I feel like we need to I don't know, I wish there were more official channels to impart this information. Like I feel like it would be great if whether it's tech companies or schools or whatever institutional avenues that are using technology, I feel should enable young people to also have access to information about best practices. It would make it all so much easier. I don't think the average young teenage boy understands that, if you take a photograph of your girlfriend, you should ask her before taking the picture, you should ask her before saving the picture, you should ask her before sharing the picture. And I don't mean to make this a gendered thing, it could go for any participants of any gender, right? Not only should the act be consensual, but if you're documenting the act, then that needs to be consensual. I mean, there's so many levels, right, of consent that I feel we just haven't had the vocabulary or opportunity to process, but we have access suddenly. So I wish that it was an official conversation rather than one that's just happening on social media. And if you're doing that work yourself, and so you're curious and you're reading sex blogs or whatever it is, I feel like we should have this information reach young people, just like we're putting smartphones in their hands and computers, and we're so quick to give them the technology, and actually all ages, all people, all genders. We should make this information also more accessible.
Cool. Actually, Ameya has a question. Ameya, you want to ask a question? Hey.
Should I video also?
Put your video.
Okay. So messy, dirty. I'm like backlit and frontlit, and okay, there we go. At least you can see me now. Right. So my question was, this is something I have in my head a lot, right? Because I feel like sometimes the apps are amazing because it allows you to meet people that you could never have met before, to even meet people at all, which a lot of people may not have had. Like me, as 40 single working from home, where am I going to meet men, right? But I wonder if they're a problem because they set up ridiculous expectations. First, because you think that I can meet the perfect person because I have this endless catalog of people in my phone. And secondly, that, you can walk in there and be like, listen, I don't want a relationship, or I want a relationship, or right, like 5 minutes after you meet someone. Now you meet someone in a bar, you're not going to say, okay, I want a relationship, or I don't want a relationship 5 minutes into meeting them, right? And also how much can you tell about a person from 3 photos and 3 hashtags, right? Like that was my question. Do you think that this is a problem that happens?
That's a great question. Who wants to take that first?
Someone who uses apps, man.
I have a question for you, especially,
I can see it.
Leeza, Priya, I think she makes a great point. She's saying, I mean, there's sort of this weird behavior that we do, where you sort of just meet someone on an app and you're already saying what you want, what sex you want, whether you're willing to have sex, when you're willing to have sex, etc., which you might not do in a bar. And you do have this sort of feeling of plenitude, right? That there's so many options, and therefore you should, if you have so many people to swipe right or left on, you should be meeting, really amazing people, and your expectations are higher. So what do you guys think about that?
I do think, I remember talking to someone a few years ago who had just gotten engaged, and they were saying that I wonder if I'm settling. And I was really a little shaken by it because to me, like, I mean, love, it's so opposite to the notion of like this sort of calculated, like, am I settling? I mean, obviously, marriage has been a practical concern in India for some time now, but I'm not talking about that kind of thing. I'm talking about a relationship that you start of your own volition, where you're like, I wonder if I'm settling because I think I could be getting somebody with a better job. This was this person's like specific concern. And I found that really, really strange. But I do think that there is sometimes, because there's so many people, like, and people are so, the other issue that I have is, which sort of ties into this a little bit, is that I think people, it's so easy to be mean online. And I do think that and the sort of casualness sometimes that apps and gender can mean that a lot of people's feelings get hurt, because you're just like, well, yeah, I've come here on this date. Like, are you the best option for my friend with benefits, the situation that I want for 6 months, etc., etc. Nobody has a solution to that, but it would be good if, people could remember that what they're looking for might change, their type might change. I was very much a person who said, I have a type, I'll only date this kind of person, and I was entirely wrong about myself. So I know that I'm not the only one, and other people have to be wrong about their own expectations and what they want as well.
That's a really good point, right? I mean, at some level, you're closing yourself off if you walk onto an app and say, okay, this is exactly what I want, and this is exactly who I want. And apps kind of encourage that. That kind of it's I have a checklist, and I want everyone who like hits. And maybe that's not what you want. It's sort of you don't open yourself up to experiences that are outside what you might imagine. Lisa?
You know,
But if I could play devil's advocate for a second. Oh, so Lisa, why do we always do this? Like
no,
talking
please,
over each other.
Meenakshi,
You
go for it,
first.
go for it, go. No,
I was
please,
just
please, please.
I was just going to say read types. I mean, I used to do this all the time when I was single, pre-apps, right? I used to be like, oh no, that person's not my type. And I think that apps actually help you talk to more people than you normally would. Because maybe you swipe like right on someone and you realize after like 5 minutes, oh, they're not really my type looks wise. But then you have really good like banter or whatever. And you wind up talking to them. Now, if I was at a bar and someone walked up to me, I'd realize much sooner that they weren't my type. And I would probably shut them down immediately. Do you know what I mean? And I think that apps actually help with
They do. Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Sure. So Lisa, where did you come down?
On my public platforms, I always speak in general terms and really reserve personal experience and personal opinion, because what is true for me is not true for everybody. But I feel like in a small group like this, it is a nice opportunity to talk about more personal sort of takes on things. And I've never actually used dating apps and never really wanted to, because for me, I've always found attraction to be this really intangible quality about a person. Either they have it or they don't. And it isn't about a type. I don't have a type, but it's almost like you have to smell right. I don't know how to explain. And I don't mean literally, but do you know what? There's like this intangible quality and electricity that is not possible to communicate via a picture or via text. And I feel like the most exciting relationships I've been in, or even in casual encounters I've been in, are when there was that electricity that I could never have gauged had I not encountered that person in real life. And so, and another thing I feel that kind of disincentivizes my use of apps. Obviously, I'm my poor partner. I am in a relationship and have been in a long time, so I don't use apps. But I think that even before this relationship, ever since I discovered the world of pleasure products, and I was late to that discovery, I do think that if you're looking for a casual encounter as a vulva owner, it's inevitably it is disappointing. And so ever since, and I mean, each to their own, and toys might not be for everyone, but I love my toys. And to me, it's like I have a Ferrari in my garage. Why am I going to take the bus,
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. The whole, it's too close to shopping online, the dating app experience for me. And I'm a little old fashioned like that. I like to be able to be have a sort of in real life, I don't know, chemistry.
Yeah, and it's also a lot of like you feel chemistry when you're texting each other, and then you have all these people who complain, right? Then they meet in real life, and suddenly that chemistry isn't there, the connection isn't there, the electricity they felt when they were messaging back and forth, which then felt really like they had something, and it isn't there when you're in person, when your bodies are actually next to each other and you can see each other.
Yeah, and I think sorry, can I quickly say one thing?
Yes.
I feel like this person who checks the boxes on the app, there are apps and apps. There are the apps which just have the pictures, and then there are apps which have like credit scores and whether they went to college or not and which clubs they're members of and whatever, right? So I feel like if you find this person and you think you're going to be attracted to them just because they meet all your boxes and that's your sort of filter for who you're going to meet, in fact, arousal doesn't really work like that. Like you might feel extremely attracted to someone you would never have considered dating. At least that's happened to me. If you just saw what their, life experience and qualifications and everything are on paper. So I feel in a way, if your own preferences and the algorithm is kind of limiting your prospects, you are going to see a kind of homogenous pool of people in a weird way, even though your choice is amplified. I'm not sure whether your choices, whether, your biases are going to be playing into it, and especially in more diverse, in places where there's more ethnic diversity. I mean, people's racial biases in India, your caste and religious biases are going to be playing into who you're even giving the chance to go on a date with or whatever. And that, I mean, I'm not sure how, to me, that's not, I feel like when you
I have
encounter
a
people in real life,
Leeza, just a quick
sometimes that can be
interjection.
subverted actually.
Yeah. Oh, I just wanted to say
Yeah,
something,
go
Leeza,
Priya.
because yeah, you just reminded me of something that I was working when I was working in an office once with somebody, and he was swiping on his lunch break, and he was chatting to somebody, and like looked up in frustration from his phone and said, "Man, Tinder is just really very fuck all because I'm talking to a woman and I've just figured out that she's a secretary." Like, and the implicit thing was so like, how could I, like, she is a secretary, like she is like of a lower socioeconomic class than me, like how can this be? And so yeah, I find that so interesting because it obviously it's not an equalizer because it's a lot of it is about English language and having access to apps, etc. But that degree of equalizing also really bugs people who are very, very comfortable with stratified dating, like really, it really bothers them.
And I noticed a lot of people I knew moved from Tinder when too many people got on Tinder to whatever the Hinge or Bumble or something. Those are like meant to be cooler and with more English language PLUs like us, right?
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there, and now you have dating apps in the US that are like only for Ivy League people. It's sort of, it's a very country club version of a dating app, which is sort of the contrary to what you were saying, Meenakshi, that the idea is that it should open up a whole world of people that you generally don't encounter, right?
But the weird thing is, when I was single, I tried to join a dating website, pre-apps called Sirf Coffee. The idea was you paid a membership and they'd hook you up with someone based on your interests, and you'd meet them. And I wrote to them. I thought, they'd be so excited to have me. I am so nice. But alas, they never got back to me. And I told this one woman I was working with at the time, I said, I wrote to them, they never wrote back. She looked at me and she's like, they only take HNIs. And I'm so not an HNI. I was like, what is an HNI? So a high network individual, by the way, if anyone else who didn't know. So yeah, so I think it's been happening for a long. There was another thing called Flow or something, right? Do you guys remember Flow?
Yes.
Where you went for activities, and the idea was during those activities you'd fall in love, like wine tasting or rock climbing or something. I don't know anyone who actually met their partners at any of these things, by the way. I don't even know what happened to Sirf Coffee, but it was an interesting model at the time.
And also, I think the idea is that going back to what Leeza said is because we had a great conversation with Madhavi Menon last time we did this, and she was talking about how desire is unruly. That it doesn't really follow it. You don't really lust after the people you think you ought to lust after. The whole point of human desire is that it's quite, disobedient, right? As to like what you think it should be doing and who you should be looking for. So actually, Juby has a advice question. Juby, would you like to ask your question?
Sure, thank you so much. I'm sorry I can't unvideo myself at the moment. But my question is that what would your advice be for a 26-year-old who is now pretty much tired with dating on apps? The whole uninstalling, installing, and looking at limited options at the same time. All your friends are getting married, but somehow I think growing up, I have attached certain worth to a dating profile. Your family has expectations on you and you don't want to marry the same guy from the community itself, and somehow you think that the dating world is crashing down on you. But do you think there's any kind of advice or words of solace that you think will help?
Is there any other way you have, Juby, to meet people besides apps?
Currently, I am on a marriage platform at the same time because of my family, and even there.
No, I don't mean dating. I mean, do you have any activities, book clubs, or classes that you do, or something like that?
Actually, I'm a PhD scholar, so even in the pool of academia, it's not exactly a good pool to be in, dating wise. But otherwise, because of the pandemic as well, I don't exactly have any active hobbies or to meet people as such.
I'm a little stumped because pre-pandemic dating advice is really hard to give.
I think
Why not
singlehood
take
is
a
really
break for a while?
Yeah, is underrated. Singlehood is very underrated, I think. We keep giving people advice on how to meet the love of your life and blah blah, but I mean, honestly, it's not all it's cracked out to be. I mean, just look around you at the people in relationships, at the married people in your life. How many happy married people do you know? So if you don't personally want to get married and you're not under, some dire consequences from your family, I'm off very sorry if you are under that sort of pressure. And I know it can be really hard to withstand that pressure. Most people just give. But if you do have any semblance of a choice, I would say, like, what's the hurry? I mean, why not enjoy being single and get to know yourself? Who are you? What do you want? What do you really even seek in a partner? I mean, marriage is a checkbox to just do once you are approaching 30 or 25 or whatever. I feel like it's so absurd that we look at it as this natural next step, and that we're put under so much pressure, especially as women, I feel, to see it as an inevitability rather than a choice.
Also, yes, all these things. And also, if you can narrow, because I know a lot of friends who have fatigue around this, and it's understandable because it's so shitty, especially for women, I think, like, who are dating men. Sorry, but I must be specific here. It's a uniquely shitty experience for women who are dating men, etc. So because it's so bad, I know a lot of friends who are, yeah, basically just really, really limiting it. If you don't want to take a break, that's one thing, but maybe just, let's say, have, one date in like 2 months or something, where the experience itself is so rare that you're not likely to get too burnt out on it. But just, yeah, cut it down and be really ruthless about any sort of bad vibe, anything where you're like, okay, this is not serving me. At the point where you're like, being on Tinder today or being or whatever on this app today is making me have a bad day, immediately just like, I'm going to be ruthless about it, because we have to treat it as something like, if it was a game, would you be playing it if you were, bored? If you weren't bored, would you be playing it if it was a game that made you feel bad? Well, no. So anytime you start to sense any bad vibes, just don't be afraid to cut down, take a break from it, because it's really like soul sucking otherwise, I think.
Yeah, and I think Meenakshi's thing is, I think what she was trying to say is, like, maybe are there ways for you to go out and just meet people without this huge pressure of, like, oh, you're meeting on a dating app or meeting via a dating service where both of you know exactly why you're there. Maybe it's easier to meet people. At least I met my partners when I wasn't trying to date. I was trying to do something else. I think with the partner I was trying to, like, show a pitch deck to his friend and sort of get him to vet it. And I ended up with this, with my partner who I've been with now for 5 years. One of the things, maybe, I don't know how many other kinds of things there are, but there is something called Lunch Club, where they just connect you with people just for you to talk. And you can talk about mutual interests. You can talk about, work or professional stuff. You have different goals, or you just want to meet different kinds of people. I don't know if we have something else like that. I only know of Lunch Club, but I find like maybe getting on something like Lunch Club and just opening up the idea of meeting different kinds of people. And you don't have the pressure that, oh my God, is this the one? Or, oh my God, are we going to connect? You're just having a great conversation with someone you don't know, and meeting someone new. And maybe it leads to a connection, maybe it doesn't. So it's like sort of in the pandemic time when you can't go out and join a book club, you can't go out and do something. I think joining those kind of apps might be useful. Leeza has a really great question on boundaries. Leeza, do you want to ask that?
I have a question. Oh, sorry, there's another Leeza.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I was getting confused throughout whenever she used to call on Leeza, I was like, okay, it's not me. I had to keep reminding myself of it. Yeah, so my question was actually, I came around the time we had the conversation on consent. And so the thing is, more and more as we date, we realize that there's a requirement to kind of clarify the boundaries so as to prevent future events from coming about. So how, like, the issue with that, especially when you're having casual relationships, is that it's a serious conversation. And most of the times it ends up discouraging the partner. So how do we balance both and have the conversation?
If you're talking sexual boundaries, I feel like that should be something you you have a conversation about before you try something new. I think that you should ask someone's permission. Either you or them should ask each other's permission before you try anything at all. Really, can I touch you here? Can I touch you there? Is this okay if I do this? I mean, it's kind of less sexy, but I feel like it's important. And once you get the first awkward time out of the way, then you can go ahead and have a good time. You don't have to ask permission each time. If you're talking about like other kinds of boundaries, like, oh my God, he's in the I want to poop and he's in the house, and how can I poop when someone else is in the house? Then you have to bite the bullet. You either have to go home or kick him out each time you have to poop, or you have to be like, listen, do you mind just going to the other room? And I've done this, going to the other room, closing the door and turning on your headphones for like 20 minutes to 40 minutes or however long it'll take you to. So anyway, what I'm saying is that there are easy, comfortable, but you have to bite the bullet for the first time. And once you make your first boundary known, I think it's easier to establish the rest.
Okay, just.
But I think boundaries can change.
Really
you might be okay with something tonight that you're not okay tomorrow. Sorry.
Yeah, really sorry. The thing is, like, I just realized that my question kind of got misunderstood. So my boundaries were mostly about like, okay, so we were talking about sharing pictures, right? A friend sharing, like a partner sharing our picture with someone else. So my question was around that. Like, the thing is, even before you have done it, when you go up to a person and tell them that don't do it, the assumption is that we assume they will do it. And that's kind of a wrong bias to have, because most people don't like being thought of in such a way. So my question was like, how do we set those? Like, how do we have those conversations without kind of insulting the other person?
When it comes to images of oneself that you're sharing digitally or whatever it is, I feel like regardless of who the recipient is, at least I think, just because of the nature of the internet and the way things are, I wish it wasn't this way. I wish that if somebody's nudes show up on the internet, you just carry on with your life because it isn't the end of the world. But we live in a society where then it becomes a big deal, right? It can also result in the loss of your job or like a whole bunch of terrible consequences, even though having a body and having a picture of that body really shouldn't be that big of a deal. So I wish we could educate everybody to like not make a big deal about the naked human body. Nipples are still forbidden on Instagram, and there's politics around particularly the naked female body that's problematic, and we need to examine that. But given that this is the way it is, I feel like even if the person actually didn't have any intention to share your pictures with anybody, if they're saved on the phone and he leaves his phone in a taxi or I don't know, whatever, there's a phone, someone else gets his password. There's so many other sort of loopholes in your privacy online, right? So I don't even necessarily think that requesting your partner to delete an image or something like that is casting insinuations on how much you trust them. It can be, and you should also be honest about that. I feel you might not send a picture to someone you don't trust in the first place, but given that there are many ways that image that is your private image could reach other people, even if that partner isn't the vehicle for that dissemination, to me it isn't a concern that you're not entitled to have, or it isn't somehow a reflection on the quality of your relationship. And I feel like if you explain that to them, they will get it.
Yeah, and Akansha actually had a interesting comment in the comments where she said it's not just images. We routinely take like screenshots of like WhatsApp conversations and send it to our friends. We just think nothing about it. Maybe we might think more about a video or whatever, but a private conversation that someone just texts you, you just never think even twice that, let me just take a screenshot and send it to someone, right? Even if you don't do it from a malicious point of view or whatever, maybe you do it to like just have a laugh, or you're saying, oh my God, am I misreading this? So there is a sort of like tricky sort of boundary. I think part of it is also people think that once you send it to them, it's theirs for them to do what they want to do with it, right? Now it's on their phone. Sure, for sure. Raghav has a question, which is actually about he's talking about the Women's Commission member who recently said girls' phones should be closely monitored with regard to dating and eloping. And there's a whole sort of kind of shaming around, I think, in the discourse around technology and sex and dating, sort of where you sort of say, oh, she's that kind of girl, she's on, Tinder, or she's that kind of girl, she's on this. So anything on that? So I think or maybe it's not so much in certain circles, but certainly there is a sort of tech version of like, oh, you're on the make if you're on Tinder constantly swiping or something like that. So do you think there's a kind of shaming in women and for them to be using dating apps and using it to find sex or hooking up and things like that? A lot of shaming.
I think that women's lives have, there's always something suspect if a woman does something in private. So like everything, if a woman has like private messages with something, there's something wrong with that. If a woman wants to be by herself for a while, she's in the old days, well, a bad mother, a bad wife who wants to be by themselves. If a little girl wants to be by herself, you shouldn't do that so much anymore. So I think that's where the conversation comes in. That's why the men and the right wing, well, not the good right wing, the bad right wing. I don't want to tar all the right wing, considering the conversation we recently been having on the WhatsApp group about political viewpoints. But anyway, the point is, people who hate women do not like women to have private lives. And that is where the idea of not exchanging messages, not being able to have your own phone come in, because they find it so scary that a woman should have like one iota of time to themselves where they are not serving everyone else or society's pleasure, that's where they're like, oh, you must not give women phones, or dating apps are the worst because women are getting sex obsessed or whatever. It is all the idea of a woman's body going from a public body where everyone else decides what to do with it to becoming a private, self-realized entity. And I think that's where the disturbance is happening with the patriarchy.
Right. And I think what's interesting about how Srinivasan actually talked about it is he talked about like all the qualities that make them really eligible in the arranged marriage market. So I don't think men do the work of like, okay, apart from my job and being not bad looking and being well educated and whatever, or whatever that would be on a, shadi.com checklist for a good damad, right? What do I really offer to a relationship? What do I bring to the relationship? Or what do I bring to the table? Am I funny? Am I this? Am I that? Am I a curious human being? Am I interested in all sorts of, sort of even introducing yourself beyond your like, shadi checklist, and being that person and sort of putting that person, that unique person that you are forward. Is just something that they're not socialized for. They're socialized to exactly have those photos of them in Berlin. Oh, look, I have money, I've been to Berlin. Oh, look, I have a nice car, right? And these are very shadi.com kind of qualities. These are not necessarily, qualities that make someone attracted to you. I think which is one of the part of the conversation we had before. So Shreya wants to talk about the complications that come with defining a relationship. So especially in these pandemic times. Shreya, you want to ask that question?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'll ask it. Hi, Lakshmi. Hi, Leeza. Hi, Meenakshi. Hi, Priya. Hi. So my question is that basically I've been kind of the person who gives my friends dating advice. I don't know why they come to me for it, but it is interesting to listen to their problems. Not in the mean way, just in the nice, happy, solving way. So basically one of my friends recently like started texting this guy, like chatting with this guy off Bumble. And she, like they started talking, they talked for about 3 weeks or something, I guess. And now they were at a point where they, like, it was difficult for her to have that conversation where they define where this is going. And she is not really comfortable with that. And I don't know, like, I didn't really have an answer for her about how to go about talking about that, how to initiate that conversation, especially when they can't really meet right now. They are in 2 different cities, so that's not really a possibility. So is there any middle ground, any way to initiate that conversation?
So she wants to be committed with this guy and she doesn't know how to say anything, or she just wants to know what's happening.
She, in my opinion, she kind of does want to date him, like date him and like be in a proper relationship. But because like in a normal world scenario where you meet somebody as friends, you know somebody for a long period of time, and then you define that relationship as being something more than friendship. But when you meet somebody online, you basically establish that you are attracted to each other in a certain way, and then you have to go about what that attraction means and how serious you are about it. So I don't really know, like I think she wants to like date him.
And does he seem open to the idea?
Yeah, of course, like he seems open to the idea, and he's like extremely nice, and he texts her like all, I don't know, very monogamy glorifying texts is what I call them, like you're the only person who has made me feel this way and all of that. So I don't really know what to say to that. Sometimes I feel like, because he has like mentioned that he sometimes does get commitment phobic and all. So I don't know, like I don't want my friend to get her heart broken and all.
In my opinion, what I would do is I would just ask him, listen, are you talking to anyone else? I'm the only person you're talking to. And then that can lead to a longer conversation where he's like, oh no, I'm also talking to 3 other people, or no, I'm not talking to anyone else. What about you? And she's like, no, neither am I. Do you want to just be with each other instead of opening it up to other people? And then he can say yes or no. That's how it's always worked for me in the past. But it's a bold move. It'll require some courage. I suggest doing it late at night after a couple of drinks.
Priya, Leeza?
I have to say I'm not super like sold on commitment phobia. I would ask her to maybe push. I agree. I mean, this is not really advice for dating, but just generally, if I think it's not a bad thing to ask. Okay, why do you think you're commitment phobic? Because I think it's such a lazy thing sometimes. In so many men who've said that they're scared of commitment, it's either coming from some really sexist belief about relationships with women sort of being the end of fun or something like that. Either it's something like that, or it's some complete BS about, oh, my last ex was this or that or something like that. So I'll have to say I'm a little bit like, to me, commitment phobia is a little bit of a sign that there's something like that is worth digging into before you take it further with someone. Because I don't think commitment phobia is ever an excuse to treat somebody badly. It's just not. You can't excuse all things with, sorry, I was scared of commitment. Yes, guess what? So are women. Everybody is in the world is, but we still power through it. So yeah, I would ask about that.
Leeza?
I think that covered it. I feel like I was reading a question while the question was being asked. I'm sorry, but your friends are in a long distance kind of equation, and the man is not willing to define the relationship, and the woman wants definition. Is that the basic question?
Yeah, I think the challenge here is that if they had met and they had, if they had met, they would have done things with each other. It would have been a natural progression.
So they've never met?
Never met. I think my sense is that they've never met.
Yeah, no, they have never met. It just started like 3 weeks ago online.
I mean, if they've never met, honestly, I would also be commitment phobic. Okay, I'm sorry, but I can't call someone I've never met my
that's true.
partner. I mean, they could be a sociopath. Who knows? So I would tell her.
Come on, if you're video chatting with someone every day, then surely you're allowed to like that. That's kind of a relationship. Video chats
for 3 weeks and you've never met.
3 weeks is a bit soon. I
and
agree.
Video chats, I don't know. I mean, how do you even know it's the actual person? I feel like there's so many. I mean, I hope they're the actual person, but there's like phishing, there's scams, there's all kinds of things, and people of all genders doing this and this. So every day you read in the papers about someone who took 20 lakhs from someone else by convincing them they were going to move in with them in 2 months or whatever. So I feel like, I don't know, I'm way too much of a skeptic to call somebody my partner based on a few video chats. And I would, if they were my friend, I would be like, hang in there, don't fall in love with this person you've never met quite yet, because who knows, maybe you're going to meet them and they'll be terribly disappointing. Maybe you'll meet them and it'll be the most magical thing ever. But why don't we wait till we do meet at least once, at least once? I mean, I don't know. I feel like while video calls are great, if you've never met a person, I do think it's difficult to really be something more than a very good friend, because there is something about being able to verify who the person is and see them in the flesh, and I don't know, to figure out if you're attracted to them. And given the lack of accountability on the internet, you can't even be sure if the person is who they say they are until you meet them.
I'm going with romance here. I feel like if it's bad when you meet them, but at least you'll have this good time now when you're like, oh, this is my boyfriend, and then you can break up with them once you meet them if they're not the same person.
Well, there you go. Those are two different ways to go about it. In the end, even if you say they're your boyfriend, there's no real commitment until you meet. That's basically the way it is, right? You can always change your mind. Vikram wants us to ask this question. He says he's more comfortable with text. And I think this is a very good question. I think a lot of people struggle with this. And this is where, I haven't dated forever doesn't work. It's actually right in your, wheelhouse, so to speak, which is that how do you maintain erotic passion in a long-term relationship? He's saying if eros is giving what one does not have, and passion burns when one does not have, which is in absence, right? Or trying to get someone, which is what really fuels passion lots of the time. Can monogamy sustain erotic passion? Which I think is an excellent question. Who wants to go first? Come on, Meenakshi. You can't do your I haven't dated forever thing yet.
All right. I'll go first. I think there's two different kinds of passion. I think there's a passion that you meet when you first meet someone, and there's all that excitement and first date flutters, and oh my God, and then you're getting comfortable, getting into other's rhythms and stuff, and then I think there's a passion that comes from being with someone and loving them for a really long time, and that is completely different. And in many ways, I think it outweighs that initial first date rush, which I think is why a lot of people call themselves commitment phobic, because they don't want to give up that first date rush. If only they knew that on the other side of that first date rush mountain was this amazing lake of deep feelings where you could do whatever you want, and everything that you do, all the sex, is imbued with so much love and care and tenderness for the other person that it just becomes amazing. It's pure passion. It's evolved. It's the next level.
Leeza, Priya?
Leeza, go ahead.
I mean, I really like Esther Perel's insights on the sort of conflicting forces at work between love and desire, or a long-term relationship, and the sort of, I don't know, hunger for novelty or whatever that is. I think that there is, of course, something, there's a trade-off in a way, right, between the excitement that comes with novelty and discovery and not knowing somebody very well and being excited about knowing them, and then there's this other quality of knowing someone really well and having a shared sense of attachment and being sort of a team. That's also really wonderful. But when with the qualities that you gain from each situation, there's also a trade-off. And I think we'd be lying if we said that people in monogamous relationships who really love each other and all of that don't ever have a thought about someone else, or have never experienced attraction in their life again. You can choose not to act on that if monogamy is a system that you've decided you're going to subscribe to. But it is human to sometimes feel I feel like it's not, you don't need to be hard on yourself if you sometimes aren't feeling super sexual in your relationship, or there is an element of like the sexiness and the desire and all of that. You become sweatband twins a little bit, after you become a bit like roommates. I mean, you're living together, you're doing everything together. You're, particularly during the pandemic, I think a lot of couples are suffering from like overexposure, which can kind of put the brakes on the sexiness, because there is something exciting about mystery and having a bit of space, enough space to see each other as independent entities rather than this one unit. And so I feel like there's ways to keep that alive, though, to keep that sense of like each person's individual identity and everything that attracted you to them in the first place alive. I think, unfortunately, when I don't know, there's so much pressure to have kids and to do everything together and to like have no individual friendships or do no activities solo or all of that kind of thing. Often in couples, it's almost as if you own each other now, and like, you know, giving attention to anything other than each other is somehow cheating on. I mean, I don't know, couples think it's like cheating to masturbate or cheating to watch porn or cheating to have a very good friend or whatever. People have strange insecurities around like their partners having any kind of independent life, and I think that it's actually quite beneficial and can add a lot of excitement to your life to allow each other a little bit of space.
I want to say, as a woman, actually, I found that the sex I had was better in a very loving, long-term relationship, because it allowed me to sort of, because I've been so socialized to perform in bed, and be sexy in bed and sort of put the other person's needs first. So when I actually sort of settled into a relationship and I felt comfortable and I felt safe, I was able to do more and be more, sort of connected to myself, and more comfortable, and not be sort of, and because women have all sorts of baggage when they get into bed and they get naked, right?
Yeah.
So for me, a lot of like what happened in a long-term relationship was that the sex got better for me. I don't know about him,
Yeah.
but I assume it was fine for him. But it really did help. It helped me. I thought, I had more eros and passion because, all that bullshit in my head, took some time to like sort of recede, and I could like settle in and be comfortable and feel safe. So maybe that's something to think about, Raghav. Um,
Oh yeah, I
Sorry.
just want to add something to that. So I wrote an article a couple years ago, and for it I was looking for crowdsourced opinions from women who primarily or also had sex with men, and this was such an overwhelming consensus that this sort of this freewheeling, like casual, like sex as empowerment sort of era that we had, like feminists were, and were in, this has sort of receded a little bit, because I think there's more space now for people to talk about the fact that, look, casual sex is not always really doing a good job for us. Like it's quite complicated sometimes, and a lot of girls I spoke to said that, and me too, it was me too. Like there were so many encounters where like I felt like either my pleasure did not matter, or I was just a body that a man was using to masturbate into, something like that. So there is, with that kind of thing, that's one aspect of why I think long-term sex can get better and better for women. But the other thing that I was thinking about when reading that question was that quote from Ursula Le Guin, I think. Love doesn't just sit there like a stone. It has to be remade all the time like bread. It has to be made new. So I think that's very, very true of like eros and long-term relationships, and of the relationship itself. You don't just sit with it every day. The sex changes, your relationship with that person changes. But as long as you love and you respect them, then it can get, it never has to die. I don't think it ever has to die.
Great. So I have a private question. Someone DM'd me. They don't want to be identified. And it's interesting. So this person said she didn't date much in life. And she really didn't date at all. And when she dated the first person, she ended up getting married to him. And that's great. She's clearly quite happy with it. But she feels like that in her circle of friends and acquaintances, she sort of is like, everyone's like, oh my God, you ended up like, with the first person you ever dated, which also, of course, implies that's the only person you ever had sex with. And she feels like pressure to almost lie and say to people, no, 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 no. I had lots of like, boyfriends before I got into this relationship. Where is that coming from? I mean, do you think there's a pressure? There is, we talk a lot about the pressure on women to be sort of moral and chaste, but as we get more and more, I don't know what the world is, modern, postmodern, I don't know where the hell we are now, but that there's also pressure on women on being like, liberated, and sort of like you should have had lots of partners and you shouldn't have ended up with the first person you met or fell in love with. Does anyone want to take that?
Sure. I think that the pressure, it's there's so many different kinds of expectations that are placed on you that absolutely I know it's an easy thing to say, just try and resist it, but it's such a ridiculous thing to say, because what is it really like? Oh, sorry you didn't kiss more frogs, or whatever it is. Like, sorry you didn't have like bad mornings after. Sorry you didn't have, somebody who you really liked ghosting you right after sex. Sorry you didn't have. There are so many shitty things that come along, and I know, like, this was so much part of my sort of stock in trade for a long time, because I was living this life, I was writing about it, and it was brutal in many ways. I wouldn't go back and change it, but I don't think that there's anything to, if you're feeling like sort of like you missed out, then I would encourage anybody to remember that all the unglamorous things about that lifestyle, and just sort of, yeah, don't worry too much about that. The grass is always greener, and that's not really, like, having had lots of partners can be, I don't know, just not a very fun. Come on, like, how many people can say that, having lots of partners equals to lots of great sex? I don't think that that's a correct equivalency at all, especially if you're like a woman who has sex with men. Well, sorry, but did you read that statistic about women who had in relationships with men orgasming compared to women who had to lesbians? And did you see that orgasm disparity? Jesus, yeah, that was dire. I tell you what, that was dire.
Just Google the
You know
orgasm
what?
gap, you'll
Also,
get all the stats.
I also want to add on to what Priya was saying. I think this ties into how women have to be performative, right? Either you're being performative when you're being a good girl and keeping your legs crossed until marriage and then popping out many children, or you're on the other side and you're with all the cool kids. And the cool kids are like, oh yeah, we had sex with 20 different men. How many of you had sex with? Oh, only one. Ha ha ha. You poor thing. I mean, the thing is, it should work for you. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you are the only person who matters in this story. If you're feeling, like Priya said, if you're feeling like you missed out on something, then maybe there are ways you can liven shit up. You can just get your partner to never call you back, like, for example, for like 2 weeks, and then you can see what it's like to be ghosted. Or it's more seriously, maybe you can try out some games at home and um, you know see what different ways you can have a sex life with variety with the same person that you are with. Ultimately, though, I don't think you need to have slept with anyone to be part of the cool girl club, as it were. If you feel cool, you're a cool girl. I mean, that's the end of the argument. And if your friends are saying these things to you, it's probably because they're jealous. Because, there's a lot of frogs. There are awful frogs.
And I want to say from my point of view, and maybe Leeza can then jump in. It's like, it's not just for you being married and people telling you like, oh my God, you ended up with the first person you married. I was in a very long-term relationship. I was actually married. My marriage fell apart, and then I did not date anybody for 5 years. Can I tell you what a crisis it was for my friends? It was a crisis. I hadn't kissed anyone. I hadn't gone on a date. They're like, what are you doing? What are you doing? 5 years of celibacy, right? And they were just freaking out. I was comfortable with it. I was okay with it. I just wasn't feeling it, and it wasn't that I was in mourning. Everyone's like, oh my God, you haven't gotten over your broken marriage. I was like, no, that isn't it. I was just busy. I was running First Post. I had a young baby. I had lots of friends. I just wasn't feeling it. I just wasn't interested. And it was really hard for my friends not to like see that as a problem. You know what I mean? And people who really loved me and care about me, they were just concerned that I wasn't having sex or I wasn't having anything sexual going on in my life or romantic going on in my life. And I think, you have to do what you want to do, and you're not, it's about how you feel and what makes you happy. Maybe Leeza, you want to jump into that, like, sort of the pressure, the two-way pressure on women.
Yeah, I think it's really unfortunate that there's like, you can never get it right as a woman. There's some people who have to fear, being even, killed on their wedding night if they don't bleed, if there's no blood on the sheets. So, stupid things like that still happen. It's absurd that this is even in 2021 for this to even be a thing that happens, right? But it happens. And on the other hand, I don't know, I mean, a woke circle, if somebody is being shamed for being sexually inexperienced, that's also absurd. I think the stakes are a bit different. So, which is why I suppose it can seem sometimes like people are, I never want to come across as if I'm telling people to go have sex with lots of people, go have lots of sex with lots of people. That's not what I'm saying. I just want to say that let people do whatever they want to do and stop policing people, right? That the fact is that most of the policing happens to the people who do have, I mean, the consequences are so dire for women who have sex before marriage, for queer people who are out, for right. So unfortunately, the messaging can seem a bit like it's, I think it shouldn't ever seem that way. But if you feel like left out because you're not having as much sex, or I feel like, asexual identity is another thing that gets kind of invisibilized in sex positive spaces. When actually it really isn't about having lots of sex with lots of people. It's about just allowing people the freedom to choose. Mainly the people who aren't, are not having sex or got married to the first person that they ever fell in love with or whatever it is, don't end up facing these sort of social stigmas and consequences, and I don't know, all kinds of like quite dire consequences, right? So I feel like sometimes they're left out a little bit from the activism sort of messaging around sexuality. But of course, like the whole emphasis is on choice and what's good for you, and nobody should be shamed for their circumstances, whether it is that you've slept with many people or slept with no people or one person, or really like it's no one's business but your own. And there's no formula to a fulfilling sex life, right? You might have the best sex life ever with this person that you were lucky to meet and never have to look beyond, and someone else might have a wonderful adventure sleeping with lots of people, and then lots of people might be quite dissatisfied with their sex lives on either side. I mean, there is no one answer, in my opinion.
Great answer. Because, I think after 5 years, when I finally met someone, they were so excited when I had sex with them. They were like, oh my God. I'm like, really? You're going to pop out the champagne now? It's ridiculous. Akanksha has a great question. Akanksha, you want to ask your question?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, I am by nature someone who's quite cautious. And I think that is maybe one reason why I've had a fairly sparse love life to that extent. But I think the trouble has been that with the pandemic coming up, right, a lot of my tendencies to be very cautious have just gotten confirmed as great tendencies for keeping myself safe, keeping myself isolated. So I want to ask if you have any suggestions for how do I ease myself back into actually meeting people and not constantly having like a ticker tape running in my head saying, okay, sanitize now. What did he touch before this? Because I'm anticipating a lot of worry as I really start doing that.
Don't be afraid to ask. I think it's entirely like what you're feeling is entirely natural. So many people must be feeling the same way. And I think that dating apps and sites or whatever, wherever you're meeting people, is a really good audition to see if somebody is, respectful of your boundaries. If you ask as many questions as you feel you need to ask, you can ask, do you meet a lot of people? Are you taking precautions? And these are not, onerous questions for somebody to answer. They should absolutely answer them if they want to meet you. I've seen screenshots of guys being really shitty and saying, oh, why can't you come meet me in lockdown, etc. Come on, like, don't be like such a scaredy, like just really shitty pressurizing messages to women, like to abandon their fears. And anybody who acts like that, or anybody who's not willing to answer your questions and make you feel like 100% safe, please don't talk to them anymore, because you are you are not wrong. This is entirely valid. So many people are feeling this way. So the onus should be on people to reassure you. So, yeah.
As a fellow overtly cautious person, I'm also struggling with meeting people in this post-pandemic world. So I think what I do, I mean, just to meet friends or whatever, I used to say let's just meet on a balcony or let's meet in a garden. I mean, there's part of me that just wants to like get it all over. It's like, okay, fine, let's just meet. Let's just have like 20 people in my house and have a party. And then you're like, no, I don't want to die. But I think essentially when you start going into it, you'll figure out the rules for this new world by yourself. You'll be like, okay, I can do this, and this happened and it wasn't the worst, and this happened and it was kind of okay. And I have a feeling that in the future, people are going to start putting vaccination reports on their Tinder profiles, so you can see who's vaccinated and who's not. Apparently, they're starting to build little badges. I learned about this in Splainer, Lakshmi, that you can put little vaccinated badges on your Tinder profiles.
I think what they're doing in the UK and all, they're giving you hearts if you put your vaccine.
Exactly. See, so I think it's gonna. So you can be able to like sort through people. No, but I think it's going to be hard. I think it's going to be hard for all of us, single, not single, everyone, just to get back into the phase. So I wouldn't beat yourself up too much. But like, okay, fine. I'm cautious. This is the way I am. It has kept me alive up till now, and I will continue doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, thanks. No, I agree. I think as far as the purely COVID related and vaccination related questions are concerned, those I'm fairly comfortable with. But yeah, I think like you guys said, it's a question of dipping the toe back in and restarting.
Leeza, any parting advice? Leeza? Did you lose it?
Sorry, my mic was on mute, and I think my internet connection was a little bit unstable. I think that I'm super OCD and cautious as well, and so to me, it doesn't yet seem quite yet time to meet new people. But so we've held on for this long. I feel like hold on till everyone has their 2 vaccines. I don't know. That's my personal philosophy. But I might also just be cooped up in here forever. Who knows? Because it has been very long already, and I can imagine that it's tiring. But I do not fault you for wanting to make sure your partner is safe. I feel like pre-pandemic, penis owners were so reluctant to use condoms, and the attitude around STDs and things like that was so lax, and it was as if no one has one, no one can. I mean, how could I have one? You would know if I have one. And I feel like men put in a lot of effort to try and convince women that condoms don't need to be used. And I hope that now with this talk around, the usage of masks and testing and the fact that it is absolutely valid to ask your partner whether they've had the vaccine and things like that, I hope it also kind of trickles down into our ability to talk about STDs, STD status, using protection, because I think that while hopefully we will overcome COVID and, this might be something that just becomes something we learn to live with and have the medical infrastructure for decades, sexually transmitted diseases have been something we haven't been comfortable talking about. And it's another thing, a similarly contact-based thing that you should be able to talk with your intimate partner about. So I hope that some of the OCD around COVID, safety measures and things trickles into being able to talk more about safety during sex in general.
Yeah, and I think, Akansha, in general, I'm a very cautious person too, and I don't think you sort of force yourself to not feel something that you're feeling just because, if you're a naturally cautious person and you get into relationships or about other people, that's okay, that's you, right? And when you feel like it's right to take a risk or take a leap, you will. So I think a lot of it is trusting yourself, and not sort of boxing yourself into like, oh my God, I'm too cautious. This is a problem with me. I have to fix this problem. There are people who will just jump, without thinking twice, which is not necessarily, the wisest thing to do either. But that's who they are, and that's how they live their lives. So I don't really believe that you should phrase that as a problem about yourself that you need to fix. I think that is the problem. I think you should embrace who you are. So absolutely. So fantastic. We've gone on so long because everyone's talking about their favorite subject. Thank you so much, Meenakshi, Leeza, Priya, for being so patient, for your fantastic answers. Thank you all for such great questions. I'm always blown away by how our subscribers and our audience is just so smart, man. All of you are so smart. You ask such great questions. It's always such a pleasure. I learn so much from these conversations. So thank you so much for being here, and have a fantastic weekend, everyone.
Thanks for
having me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye all.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.